ignore this, we ignore the fact that this is a war of annihilation. Those who do not realize that we have to mobilize all means at our disposal in order to allow Ukraine to defend itself will be neglecting their duties. What do I mean by this? In concrete terms, what is needed is more ammunition, more air defense, more long-range weapons, so as to allow Ukraine to defend itself and to ensure that it survives. We've been working together for 2 years now, closely, every day in the European Union with our most important partners like the United Kingdom. Our objective being that Ukraine can, just like us, finally live a life in peace. At the same time, we're looking towards the economic reconstruction of Ukraine, humanitarian aid for Ukraine, where people need to be able to survive, the economic reconstruction of the country. This is a central pillar of the work of the two countries we represent and also our partners, apart from providing military support to Ukraine. With the Ukraine Recovery Conference you hosted last year in London, you have planted a very important pillar. And I am pleased to be able to announce that we will host the conference in June this year. It will take place in Berlin. We will continue the good work started by the United Kingdom to highlight that also in humanitarian terms, Ukraine will not be able to break Putin will not be able to break Ukraine. It is about resilience, about civilian resilience. As long as we stand at the side of Ukraine, and this will be for as long as it takes, Putin will not succeed. As we have come to experience over the last few days, once again, Putin's aim is also to sow dissent and to destabilize our democracies. We stand up to this in a spirit of determination and unity, for we will not be intimidated by Putin. So as to ensure that every inch of our NATO territory remains safe and secure, we all invest in our deterrence and our ability to defend ourselves. For what is at stake here is nothing less than our security and our freedom, the security and freedom of Europe. A strong Europe, side by side with the United Kingdom, is a strong pillar of the Transatlantic bridge, regardless of who may be standing at the other side of the bridge. We will demonstrate that sense of unity when we meet again in Washington on the occasion of the NATO summit in July. And we've talked about this, amongst others, today. Of course, we've also had an equally extensive and intensive discussion about the situation in the Middle East. The suffering in Gaza becomes more terrible with every passing day. And it is extremely hard to put the suffering of the people into words. We look into their emaciated faces. We see the sheer desperation of fathers and mothers who are fighting over the last sack of flour, putting their own lives at risk. Not only do we see these things, but we put ourselves in their shoes, imagining these kids being our children, needing urgently the food to be able to survive. That we are now not only loading lorries, but also ships and aircraft with humanitarian aid, although that is much more complicated, illustrates that via the land route, we are not able to get enough aid deliveries into Gaza. We have underlined the need for us to do more. The Israeli government has to urgently open more crossings into Gaza for humanitarian aid deliveries, and it has to ensure that the food gets where it is needed. It is their responsibility. And because each and every individual package of aid counts, we are working with our partners in the European Union and in the region, especially with Cyprus and the Emirates, to set up a maritime corridor to Gaza. And we have been supporting Jordan and the World Food Programme, allowing them to fill their aircraft and to ensure that they can airdrop aid over Gaza. This, as I said, is not the most efficient way of going about it, but in the view of the fact that the border crossings are not open, that we all need, we want to avoid a complete collapse. What we've seen collapsing is public order in Gaza, and that has made it very clear that we cannot continue in the same vein. Thus, we both send out an urgent appeal today on behalf of the United Kingdom and Germany when we say we urgently need to agree on an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. We need a breakthrough in the negotiations. It is always painful to engage in compromise, but the hostages must finally be allowed to leave the dark tunnels of Hamas. They must be released, and more aid has to go into Gaza, and the killing in Gaza has to stop. That Hamas has been refusing for weeks to release the hostages is a clear impression. These are terrorists, and those who still find it hard to call a name, these people by their names, and to call a spade, I appeal to them and say, imagine just for a minute that these children were your children, being forced to live in dark cellars and tunnels, held hostage and prisoner by Hamas. This is a dilemma, as has become obvious, because we had to note that the settlement policy pursued by Israel continues to pour oil on the fire, on the already fragile security situation. And we will only be able to get away from this conflict if we finally talk about long-term perspectives to solve the Mideast conflict. This is why I want to be very clear in saying that the decision that the Israeli government took yesterday to set up further new settlements is illegal, unacceptable, and has to be retracted. It constitutes an impediment on the path towards peace, and it is not and cannot be in the interest of the security of Israel. Apart from these major crises of the world that we've talked about today, we of course also discussed bilateral issues. The strategic dialogue is designed for these issues and offers a platform that allows us to make our partnership fit for the future, for the benefit of the people in both our countries after Brexit. And for the many people on both sides of the Channel, many things have become somewhat more complicated as a consequence of Brexit. Engaging in youth exchange or enjoying a work experience, studying abroad, engaging in academic research abroad. We cannot turn back the clock, but what we can do is make the most of what we've got, especially in those areas that affect people-to-people contacts. And therefore, I'm pleased that, as I said, apart from touching upon the major geopolitical issues, we've been able to talk about those things that are of importance for especially the young generation in our countries, and that we will now swiftly address the issue of the list of travelers visa scheme to make it easier for groups of pupils to visit the respective countries. Ladies and gentlemen, dear David, the list of the topics we've discussed is long. As I said, we could have gone on for 2 or 3 days and wouldn't have been able to finish, but I'd like to thank you for the discussion today. Next time you come to Germany, hopefully we will leave those conference rooms for a moment and perhaps be able to cheer on our respective teams to watch a match of the European Soccer Championship, and may the better team, in the same spirit that we have demonstrated, win, but friendship stops where sports begin. But I look forward to welcoming you back in Berlin soon. Thank you very much indeed.
May the better team win, but not on penalties. I think we can all agree about that. Annalena, thank you very much for the warm welcome. It's a real privilege to be back in Berlin and with you, having this strategic dialogue. And can I say that how much I welcome the partnership that we're forming. You speak with such strength about Ukraine. You speak with great moral clarity about what is happening in the Middle East, and it's a real privilege to be working with you. And although it's only been for a short time, I think we are proving to be very strong allies, very strong partners, and good friends, and that's as it should be. I first visited Berlin back in the early 1990s. I even found a picture of myself hacking at the remnants of the wall that had by then come down, and I'm looking forward to revisiting that spot with you today. As Prime Minister, I visited Germany 12 times as a sign of how much I value this relationship and what a vital partnership there is between Britain and Germany. And one of my favourite visits was when Her late Majesty the Queen came to on one of her many, many visits to Germany, and I was able to accompany her and saw in what high regard she was held here. And I was delighted to see that His Majesty the King's first state visit was here to Germany, showing how he wants to carry on his mother's incredible work in building the relations between our two countries. This is my second visit to Germany in the 3.5 months that I've been doing this job, and I hope that we've shown that that this British Conservative and this German Green are absolutely joined up. We've already done a joint article in the newspapers which really pioneered what we're saying about the need for a sustainable ceasefire in the Middle East. We helped bring together the Munich meeting where European countries and America together with Gulf and Arab partners talked about some of the things we need to do to not only bring the conflict to an end, but build peace in the Middle East. We've worked incredibly closely together on this issue of how we get more aid into Gaza. And I completely agree with what Annalena has said. Yes, we must look at the options on the sea. We must look at options, as we've done, of delivering aid by air, as we've done recently with the Jordanians. But nothing must distract us from the fact that ultimately, if we want to avoid famine, if we want to avoid disease, if we want to help people in Gaza, we need 500 trucks a day. That means more crossing points. It means simpler logistics. It means stopping sending back items that would be perfectly harmless. It means making sure there's proper deconfliction inside Gaza so you can get this aid around. It means more visas for the UN staff so they're able to help deliver these things. This need really is urgent. I made these points to Minister Gantz when I met him yesterday, and I make these points again today to urge all parties, and of course it's not just the Israelis, there are others involved, but all parties, principally the Israelis, to make this happen and make this happen now. Of course, the other priority in the Middle East is how we bring about this stop to the fighting, which we want to happen now. We want this pause to happen now with this hostage deal that's now on the table, and Hamas should accept it. They are the ones now holding up the stopping of this fighting. But the crucial work that Annalena and I have been doing is to say, how do we turn a pause into a permanent, sustainable ceasefire without going back to the fighting? What are the conditions necessary? And if we can put in place the return of the hostages, if we can put in place a new technocratic government on behalf of the Palestinian Authority, if we can set out that political horizon for the Palestinian people so they can see a future where they have the dignity of statehood, and if we can reassure Israel that the leaders of Hamas, the people responsible for the horrors of October the 7th, will have to leave Gaza and the infrastructure of terror will be taken down. If we can do those things, we can start to build towards not just a permanent ceasefire, but also a solution. And we'll do everything we can working together to help to bring that about. In terms of Ukraine, it's so heartening to hear the passion with which Annalena speaks about how vital it is. I just think this is the test for politicians of this generation, of this time. I don't have any doubt that the Ukrainians are brave enough. I don't have any doubt in their leadership. I don't have any doubt in their ability to fight and to resist this appalling Russian aggression. The question is for us, are we, the European countries, the Euro-Atlantic community, the allies of Ukraine, are we going to see this through? Are we going to give them what they need? Are we going to back them with everything that we have? And to be fair about this, Germany has done an enormous amount. If you look at actually which countries have given the most militarily, diplomatically, financially, Britain and Germany are two of the biggest contributors. We are playing our part, but we both know we have to ask ourselves and all our allies, what more can we do? What more ammunition can we provide? What extra production can we invest in? What weapons do we have that could help the Ukrainians in this fight? And we've been discussing this today. And of course, there's the question about what we can do in terms of medium and longer range missiles. And I just make this point, because it's a sovereign decision for every country. But in terms of what Britain has done, I know that what we have given to the Ukrainians has helped them to resist this appalling invasion and to fight back against Russian aggression. And to all those in Germany and beyond and around the continent and around the world who want to see an end to this conflict, who want to see a peaceful settlement, who want to see peace on our continent, I absolutely agree, but you get peace through strength. You get peace by demonstrating that Putin cannot win. You get peace by helping the Ukrainians deliver what they need on the battlefield, because they are fighting for their country, which has been illegally invaded. And it's our right to do everything we can to help them resist that aggression. Of course, we've discussed all the aspects of this conflict, the other things we can do, the sanctions we need to put in place to stop countries feeding Putin's war machine, the way in which perhaps we can use the assets that have been frozen, and Britain is very keen on this, to help finance the reconstruction of Ukraine and help them in their efforts. We've also, alongside those things, we've had very good bilateral discussions about everything from business and trade to climate and people to defence and also the issue of immigration, which is something that is affecting all countries in Europe, and in particular the need to smash the evil people smuggling gangs that are delivering this trade in misery, where people get into fragile rubber boats and cross the channel, many of them dying in the process, and what we can do to smash the gangs and seize the boats and stop this from happening in the first place. We discussed a number of other bilateral issues, and of course we discussed where I started, that important issue of the Euros coming up soon, and I'm delighted to be offered this invitation and what games we can look forward to. Obviously it makes me reflect on the last time I think I watched a football match with a prominent German politician. I think it was Chelsea-Bayern Munich. It was 2012. It was during the G8 conference in Schloss Elmau. And I remember particularly because Chancellor Merkel and I were very caught up in this game, I think it's fair to say. And at one point, President Obama said, look, this isn't really proper football, point one. And secondly, can we please get back to work? And I remember the former Chancellor, who was, like me, very diligent, very hard-working, said, no, we can't possibly get back to work. We have to watch the end of the game. And on that occasion, I'm very glad that we did. But I don't know what will happen, but we'll all be cheering for our teams, and it'll be a delight to come back to Germany and watch one of those games. And as a country that's hosted a few tournaments like these, can I wish you the very best. It's going to be an enormous festival of football, a great moment for Germany, and of course, I hope a great moment for all of the UK national teams who will be playing in the tournament. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mit Blick auf die Uhr haben wir noch Zeit für 4 kurze.
We have time for 4 short questions. Politico will be the first question.
Hans von der Borchert from Politico.
Hans von der Borchert, Politico. My first question is addressed to the German Foreign Minister. You made the point very clear in your statement. Long-range weapons might also have to be taken into consideration. Do you think that the German government is going to show some movement on that regard, and will you speak out on this? Will you exert more pressure? It will be subject to a debate in the Bundestag next week.
The recent remarks by Chancellor Scholz about his justification not to send the Taurus, about British soldiers in Ukraine, to which extent have those remarks perhaps put British soldiers at risk? And did you suggest in your discussions today, you mentioned also long-range weapons, the proposal that British soldiers could program and supervise Taurus missiles for their use by Ukraine? Or are you perhaps also going to suggest this later when you're going to meet Chancellor Minister Wolfgang Schmidt? Thank you.
Ja, den ersten Teil vielleicht erstmal an mich. Ich verstehe
Your first question. I do understand your great interest in this question, but as you may know, there are subjects that you do not discuss in public, on the public scene. This might also be relevant for the second part of your question, but I'd like to underline that what is required are a whole range of weapons, howitzers, for example, that we have supplied at an early stage to Ukraine, and we have recently decided to provide further howitzers to Ukraine and further material. You may be aware of the fact that the federal government is asking itself day after day what we can do on top of what we've already done to support Ukraine against the aggression. We are also continuously consulting with our partners, providing support with some of them, working with them, because we think that's the most efficient way of going about it, closely harmonizing your actions and decisions. And also, when we think about long-range weapons, anti-aircraft systems, artillery, ammunition, we tend to be most efficient if we plan together. Therefore, a vast part of our discussion today focused on the question of procuring and making available capabilities to Ukraine, but also beyond, will have to be addressed within NATO and how NATO can improve its performance financially. And we all know that we need much more money to go into that, but also with regard to enhancing our efficiency and interoperability.
I don't make any comment about British troops. That position's been set out by the Prime Minister on many occasions. I've got nothing to add to that. On the question of long-range fires, I mean, this is a matter for the German government to decide. I can only speak for Britain. I can speak for the fact that we have found with the weapon systems we've supplied to the Ukrainians, it has helped them to defend themselves from this terrible aggression. As I said in my remarks, we should pay tribute to Germany for the fact that they have done a huge amount in terms of weapons supply and diplomatic and also financial support to Ukraine. And if you add up all those things, military, diplomatic, financial support, Britain and Germany, as I said, are two of the biggest contributors. We have a proud record. We're asking ourselves what more can we do, but others should also ask what more can they do. I just make one point on this escalation issue, which comes up a lot. I think that the history of this is very clear, that at every stage it's been said, if you give anti-tank weapons to the Ukrainians, that's escalation. No, it wasn't. If you give tanks to the Ukrainians, that's escalation. No, it wasn't. If you give long-range artillery or long-range fires to the Ukrainians, it's escalation. No, it isn't. And I think the reason for that is clear. If what you're doing is helping a country defend itself from illegal and completely unjustified aggression, then there should be nothing to stop you helping that country to fight back, to recover its territory. As long as we're not in a situation where a NATO soldier is killing a Russian soldier, we are not causing escalation. We're allowing Ukraine to defend itself. And I think we need to be really clear about that point.
Thank you very much. First of all, Foreign Secretary, just to pick up on that point, are you actively pushing Germany behind the scenes to send those Taurus missiles to Ukraine? Because you clearly think, or you're suggesting you think that that would be the right thing to do. I also have to ask about the Luftwaffe leak. The German government has said that they believe trust amongst allies is unbroken. Is that true, or do you agree with your Conservative colleague, Ben Wallace, who said that he believed Germany is pretty penetrated by Russian intelligence? And to the Foreign Minister, just to push you on the Taurus missiles as well, I mean, are you trying to persuade your Chancellor to change his mind on this issue, and do you think you will succeed? And on the leak, your ambassador to the UK said there was no need to apologise for what had happened. Do you agree?
Well, let me start on this whole issue. I don't want to play into the hands of some Russian narrative about divisions between allies. What I see, 100 and whatever it is, 19 days into the job, is incredible unity between allies, incredible unity in NATO, which has just got larger with the addition of Finland and Sweden as members. And I sort of contrast in many ways what I saw in 2014 when we dealt with the incursion of Russia into Crimea. And there wasn't such unity then. Today, there's incredible unity between Britain and Germany and France and America and across Europe in helping Ukraine to fight off this aggression with everything we can. Now, of course, we're going to have areas where we want to discuss what more we can do, what more we can help. And those are the sorts of discussions that good friends and allies with this unity have in private, and that's the sort of discussions that you would expect. As I say, when it comes to the long-range weapons, I can only speak for Britain's experience of how effective these weapons have been at helping Ukraine to fight off this illegal aggression. And it's worth thinking about, the specific issue of the fact that, a year ago, Ukraine couldn't export through the Black Sea. The economy was suffering. Ukraine is a massive exporter of agricultural produce. And the fact that now, through their own efforts, not through some UN grain deal or anything like that, through their own efforts, they have pushed the Russian Navy right back across the Black Sea and are able to export grain, almost the entirety of their harvest from last year. And that is growing their economy, boosting their ability to defend themselves. That is a huge success story for Ukraine, which we should celebrate. Well, as I said, I don't want to, play into some Putin narrative. There's great unity between allies.
Ich habe hier vor
More than 2 years ago, I said something, and I was standing here just as I am here, and I wouldn't have thought it conceivable that I would have to say this at any given point in time. I said we've awoken and the world had changed, because it had been inconceivable for us that we would be forced to think about a war of aggression or speak about a war of aggression in Europe. As I said, we awoke in the morning and the world had changed. And therefore, overnight, completely new questions came up, quite different from what you would have expected in a democracy on the basis of coalition agreements and declarations of intent. What makes politics so strong, what makes politicians, those holding political responsibility in democracies, is to be traced to the fact that we are able to pass in review what we have decided and what we've done so far, and to call into question some decisions we may have taken, and to set out on a brave path that leads us to the future. And there may be points where we have not been in total agreement, where we have had different views, but we have been venturing on new ground, doing things we've never done before, and coming from different vantage points. But we've been completely reviewing our approaches, we, the members of the German government, but also with our partners from other countries. And on the basis of those reviews, we have taken decisions together in a spirit of unity and with a sense of determination. Because I believe that to be one of the most important lessons, as my colleague just pointed out. The unity and the determination has made our strength as partners at the side of Ukraine in the face of this brutal war of aggression, Russian war of aggression. And I repeat, I do what I said. I do understand what motivates your question, but we will not allow anyone to drive a wedge between us. We're talking a hybrid war here. It is a war in which hybrid weapons are being used in Ukraine, perfidious means are being used, a war of grain waged against the poorest countries of the world. And it is a perfidious war using strategic means aiming to destabilize democracies, the use of fake news, and things like the one we have come to learn about recently, Putin's policy of destabilization, discreditation, and trying to listen in to conversations that his enemies have had. And as I said, it's important to show political responsibility and leadership, not allow anyone to drive a wedge between you. As I said, I do understand your question, but whenever we may not be in complete agreement, we tend to discuss about these issues behind closed doors, because we don't want to allow Putin to divide us, and neither the European democracies, nor Europe and the United States of America, nor the members of NATO. Last but one question. Thank you. Reuters, Alexander Ratz. A question to both of you. Could you perhaps enlarge a little bit on the role that a possible election win by Donald Trump, the importance that had in your discussions today, and to what extent do you see the need or the necessity for the cooperation between Germany and the United Kingdom to be more intensive in the field of security, and also with regard to nuclear deterrence? As I said, we talked intensively about how we can strengthen the European pillar in NATO, but regardless of who will be standing at the other end of the transatlantic bridge next year. Again, what we are defending is our own security and our own freedom, we as Europeans, and we are speaking as we stand on our European continent, and therefore the cooperation within NATO, the cooperation within the European members of NATO, not only the EU member states, but the European members of NATO. The European Union has already enhanced its cooperation, and we aim to enhance it further also in the field of security of defense, but also with the NATO, our European partners, and we're not only talking the United Kingdom here, but of course also the United Kingdom because of the capabilities it has in the security political field. Of course, we talked about this today, but we talked about that in the past on more than one occasion, and it will be one matter that we will be pursuing with an eye to the NATO summit this summer. Both of us believe that the European pillar has to be strengthened in NATO because it gives us more security and freedom. As the German foreign minister of one of the largest EU countries, I would, however, also like to point out that NATO is and constitutes our life insurance. Therefore, it is important that we strengthen our defense capabilities. When we speak about a defense and security union for Europe, we always think of acting within NATO.
In terms of the strength of our defence partnership, I'd make 2 points. The first is, after Brexit, I've always said that the aim of Britain should be we're not members anymore of the EU, but we should be friends, we should be neighbours, we should be partners. And I think in many ways what this collaboration over defending Ukraine's right to throw off this Russian aggression, it's demonstrating that Britain can be best friends, best neighbours, best partners for the EU as a member of NATO and with the capabilities we have and the incredible support that we've given to Ukraine. In terms of your question about Donald Trump and the nature of our alliance, first of all, NATO is getting stronger. That's good. More countries are reaching 2%, and I salute what Germany's done to do that. We're heading towards 2.25% in the UK. And that surge in NATO is very worthwhile. NATO is a nuclear alliance. We have the US nuclear umbrella, but of course we also have the British independent nuclear deterrent, and that is itself declared to NATO. In terms of, we didn't specifically talk very much about the American elections. We were too busy talking about all the things we have to deal with. The only point I would make is it's not in our control. Britain and Germany, we will work with whoever wins the elections in the United States and try and build the importance of that Atlantic partnership. The only thing I can think is that what we should do in the next 8 months is make sure that whichever dossier we're talking about, whether it is the move towards a peace process in the Middle East or whether it's this vital fight for Ukraine to throw off Russian aggression, we want to get these things in the best possible place by the time of the US election. So whoever is the victor in that contest can see that all of our countries working together, whether we're in the EU or not in the EU, but working in partnership, have moved those onto the best possible plane they can be. Because that will make the incoming president, whoever he or she may be, more inclined to see the strength of the European partnership and the fact this isn't just about European security, it's also about global security and American security. And that's, I think, the work that we're doing today.
Neuhoff, Sky News.
Lord Cameron, you mentioned the need for more aid to get into Gaza. Is the UK doing enough to pressure Israel? Sorry? Is the UK doing enough to pressure Israel to allow aid to get into the Strip?
Look, I think we're doing everything we can. As I said, we've been very clear about the things that need to change. We really need to see more openings in terms of crossings to the border. We need to see more types of aid get in. We need to see the number of trucks go up. We need to see more UN staff with visas inside Gaza so they can move the aid around. And crucially, we need this deconfliction mechanism to work so we don't have terrible scenes where trucks are unable to move and they're raided by people and all the other terrible things that have happened. So we're doing everything we can. We're working very closely with our allies. I think the Israelis have to really understand that this is on the brink of being a desperate situation in terms of disease and famine, and so the time for doing more is now. But we also need to make sure that at the same time as saying that, we say to Hamas that they should release these hostages. I mean, think of these families. We're now coming up to day 150 of people being in this appalling captivity. I'm sure Annalena has too. I've met with hostage families. I've met with people that were released after 45 days, and the things they tell you about what they saw and what their family members had to undergo, it is horrifying. So in all the thoughts we have about the aid getting into Gaza, and I would argue no one is doing more than Britain and Germany to pile that pressure on, let's remember that there's a group of people that could stop this conflict right now, and that is Hamas. They could sign up to this hostage deal. They could release the hostages. They could, in fact, lay down their weapons and leave Gaza and give the Palestinian people a chance of a proper future. And we mustn't ever forget that there is something they could do, as well as putting this pressure on the Israelis, which is absolutely necessary.
Thank you very much.